Welcome back to the Canadian Case Studies track. I'm Ruth at Code for Canada in collaboration with Forward 50 to showcase the work that we've been doing over the past year. Before we dive in, don't forget to chime in on Twitter at hashtag Forward 50. And if you aren't already following, the Twitter handle is at Forward 50 Conf. That's at Forward 50 CONF, short for conference. This case study is with another one of our partners, the Canadian Energy Regulator. Their purpose is to regulate pipelines, energy development, and trade, and it's all in the interest of Canadians. A huge piece of their work is to enable stakeholders to file, submit, and extract regulatory information along with concerns or suggestions. And they do this by maintaining a repository of information related to upcoming projects. But currently, discovering, extracting from, and submitting to that repository is pretty manual and often very confusing. So they reached out to us to help redesign this platform and make it easier to access, and as well as being more inclusive for everybody. We're really excited to show you this project, and without further ado, I'll introduce you to Jillian and Sean. So let's dive right in.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for taking the time to attend our talk today. My name is Sean Stricker. I'm the Director of Digital Transformation at the Canada Energy Regulator.
And I'm Jillian, the UX designer at the Canada Energy Regulator.
We're so excited to have this opportunity to talk to you today about how the CER is working to remove barriers to participation. And of course, we're very interested in answering any questions you may have during the Q&A portion of this event. So let's get started. It's no secret that participation in digital processes is hard. And to many of us, it's downright difficult, intimidating, anxiety-ridden, or simply not even possible. Whether you may be applying for a new credit card rewards program to save some money on your next purchase, the pitch is always the same. Just fill out the form, make an account, give us your data, get approved, get rewarded. It's simple, right? Not really. And that's because barriers exist everywhere. And these barriers are material. They affect our customer experience and ultimately your company's bottom line. Consider the customer experience for the person trying to get a new credit card. How might they be feeling during this interaction? You need to verify my credit? What if my credit is poor? Will I even be approved? What happens if I'm declined? A new account? Another password? What is this even for again? Is it even worth it? Please just give me my reward. It sounds familiar, right? Unfortunately, it's because barriers do exist. And don't forget the impact to our companies. We need to consider our employees as well. Down to the wire with ambitious targets to meet, how might they be feeling during this interaction? I need to create a new account. Do I have to input this data myself? What if the customer lies? What if I make a mistake? What if they're declined? What do I tell them? Should I even have access to this information in the first place? And will I get in trouble if something goes wrong? What's in it for the employee? Where's their reward in this experience? Unfortunately, barriers exist internally too. We're literally making people jump through hoops to simply participate in everyday activities. These invisible barriers exist, and they have real implications to our customers and to our employees. Why does it have to be so difficult? How can we make participation easier? What can we do to fix the problem? Give them a tablet? Please, no. That's just a new interface for the form. In reality, simplifying forms is easy, but we can't forget the process behind the forms or the humans behind the process, because this is where the real change needs to happen. So to address this gap, the Canada Energy Regulator partnered with Code for Canada to design, build, and test a new public engagement system that works better for everyone. And with that, let me invite Jillian back on screen.
Thanks, Sean. So our team comprised of 3 fellows. We had Ian Capilani, our developer, Malik Jamani, our product manager, and myself, the UX designer. We also had support from our internal core team, Darcy, Elke, Susan, and Zoe. Together, Code for Canada and the CER embodied on a journey to discover and reduce barriers for external participants, while also optimizing process efficiencies internally. And I will hand it off to Sean again.
Thanks, Jillian. And at the CER, we have participants. They're kind of like our customers. They matter a great deal to us. They contribute to the effectiveness of our hearing processes, and ultimately, they influence the regulatory decisions we make. So meet Aurelia. She is a landowner who may be impacted by a proposed pipeline project, and she finds participating with the current digital systems intimidating, confusing, and very difficult to navigate. So imagine, Aurelia was just informed by her neighbor that a pipeline was going to be built adjacent to their community. Even though Aurelia may not be directly impacted by the route to the pipeline, she has real concerns about increased traffic, noise, and decreased air quality for her kids, her neighbors, and for future generations to come. Aurelia may want to participate in our hearing process to ensure that her concerns are heard and considered. So where should she start? Let me invite Jillian back to walk you through a bit of the process and what Aurelia might find when she navigates to our website.
So let's show you what Aurelia's current experience will be like. So in Aurelia's experience, you might know that she has to go through a long sign-up process. When she first wants to participate, she needs to create an account. But to create an account, she needs to register either through GCKey or a sign-in partner. Let's say she registers using GCKey. And let's say in this case, she needs to sign up for a GCKey. And this is where the first blocker comes in. She has to go through so many steps just to simply voice her opinion. And so you can imagine this might take a bit of time, and that in itself is a barrier. Now, she needs to add her personal information to her account. And so once she adds her information, now she can register to participate. And so as you kind of see here, there is a lot of information. Some of it has a lot of jargon, and it's not really user-friendly. Most people might not even read everything carefully. And so this kind of information isn't very accessible for the masses. It's not inclusive for those who maybe can't afford a lawyer. And if they want to do it on their own, we're just adding a lot of barriers. And so at this point, Aurelia might be confused. Haven't I already added my contact information? Why do I have to add it again? And so clearly, there's a lot of repetitive processes to register. And then when she finally goes through everything and she's like, oh, great, I can comment. Actually, no, she needs to share her list of issues in order to get access to comment. And so it's kind of like getting your ice cream and dropping it, or receiving your ice cream and it's sour. And so this process wasn't super accessible for Aurelia. And so, once she gets to the final page, she might be frustrated, she might feel intimidated, and she just wants to simply voice her opinion. And so after she fills this out, she will still need to wait maybe a few weeks or months to fill out similar information because she isn't able to actually voice her opinion through this step. And so let's hear what Aurelia has to say about this entire experience.
This is a real turnoff, this page. When I look at this, I think, oh boy, I don't want to do this.
So for most people, they're hoping this is the only CER process that they'll ever have to do. And now I'll hand it back to Sean.
Thanks, Jillian. Now at the CER, Our intention, of course, is to make it easier for people like Aurelia to participate and to express their thoughts on energy projects, because the decisions we make at the CER impact Canadians. And it is important for people to be able to navigate our process as simply as possible to have their say. Now, the hearing process seems simple, but simple to who? It may be simple to public servants who live and breathe the process day to day, but anyone who may not enjoy reading policy before bed, this can be downright intimidating, overwhelming, and a real barrier to participation. For someone who is not a company with access to seemingly infinite time, money, and resources, how might this further exasperate the situation for them? We need to make participants' lives easier, to improve the trust and the confidence that they have in the CER, its people, and the delivery of our regulatory services. Now I'll invite Jillian back to the stage.
Thanks, Sean. So in our work, we focused on 3 areas. We looked at how can we make digital participation tools more accessible, less overwhelming, and more streamlined. We also took a look at how we can make the hearing process easier to understand. And finally, we looked at how we can make the Canada Energy Regulator more friendly to first-time participants and the internal staff. We chose to focus on making participation easier through inclusive design. This looked like working with impacted and concerned citizens, Indigenous peoples, and the staff at Canada Energy Regulator. And I'll hand it back to Sean.
Thanks, Jillian. Consider our Trans Mountain Pipeline hearing process. We had over 1,600 people participate across Canada. There were nearly 4 times the number of commenters than interveners. And under the current system, each one of those 1,600 people would need to make an account just to log in to participate. So let's take Aurelia's experience and multiply it by 1,600 people. And that's just for the login. How many barriers were created inadvertently through this? How much time and money did this cost to our participants? Does everyone really need to log into our website? Let me invite Jillian back to share with you what some of our participants said.
Thanks, Sean. So some of our participants said that there's a lot of legal jargon throughout the process. The average person will not know what these terms mean and even know how to register to participate. Another participant said that writing an email with my comments would have been a lot easier than going through the CER's digital participation process. And finally, we had another individual mention that they felt like there was no willingness to help, almost to the point where it seems like they don't want people to participate. And so with that, we embarked on our first journey. We worked with our government partners to collaborate and rethink what was possible for the digital participation process. Through this journey, we were able to build buy-in and trust from our core team. And this eventually led us to rethinking the way people participate. This includes, do we need people to access accounts or log in? And so we explored different ways to reduce login barriers. For example, some flows were too complex and time-consuming to develop. In our initial concepts, we had the login and account sign up in the early stages of the process. Some flows were too complex and time-consuming to develop. In the first iteration, we thought that we could try putting the login near the end of the process, but that didn't really make sense for the users who wanted to simply log in the beginning of the process. So then we had another iteration where the flow worked better for returning users, and these tend to be interveners, but not those who just wanted to leave a comment. Again, while logging in was optional for commenters, it still created that barrier of additional steps for somebody who simply wanted to make a comment. And so, like the flows, our designs evolved over time. And so essentially, within each of these 4 designs, we had to really think about how we can include login for both interveners and commenters. At that time, we didn't think we can even remove commenting out of the entire process. So this would usually mean that people who, again, wanted to leave a one-time comment will still have to go through the same flow as those who are more heavily involved in the hearing process, which, if you ask me, is a big pain. And now I'll pass it back to Sean.
Thanks, Jillian. And through it all, our team kept wondering, why are we making this so complicated? Why can't we just remove the login for those who want to leave a one-off comment? Throughout the sprint with the core team, we kept hearing over and over again, we can't do this. We have to change the policy. So eventually the team just asked, why don't we just change the policy? So we worked to get buy-in from key staff and decision makers, and we worked to engage with our core team of adjudication experts. And through several iterations, multiple different memos, and various levels of review and approval, the team then presented their recommended options forward for a regulatory decision. They presented and argued their case, and ultimately a decision was made that gave consideration to what was required to enable the design of a new digital participation system, one that is simpler with less barriers to participate. So let me invite Jillian back on screen to share with you some of the results of our work.
So let's say Aurelia participates again, but this time she's participating with the updated participation flow. And so as she goes through it, she might notice that there are 2 ways to participate. One where she can comment, and the other one where she can intervene. And she'll notice that there are definitions that talks about the differences here. And she'll also know which one has a higher degree of involvement and which one has a lower degree of involvement. Another thing in which she might notice is that she can actually go down to the bottom of the page and she could really learn about what the difference is between a commenter and an intervener. And so let's say she decides to share her comments. Right away, she's just taken to the simple page. She can fill out all her information and then simply add her comments. She can even upload a PDF and attach it to her submissions. And then finally, there is a simple acknowledgement before she has to submit. And you might notice that we try to make the language very accessible to someone who doesn't understand the adjudication process as well. And then once you hit submit, there you have it. It's very simple, like ABC.
Let's give you another scenario. This time, Aurelia wants to participate as an intervener. So in this case, she does still need to create an account, but based off of our research, a lot of interveners who participate multiple times prefer to have an account so they can easily repopulate their information. Another reason why we kept the account was because our stakeholders identified it as still being important to verify someone's identity. And so let's say Aurelia continues, she creates an account. The first thing she's approached with is some really friendly icons. And so we really thought about adding that into the designs because we wanted to make Canada Energy Regulator feel more welcoming and less intimidating. So icons was a great way to start that. And so let's say she participates on behalf of herself and she considers herself First Nations. And so now she explains her interest in participating. And so she'll go through this form, and keeping in mind that the form is very easy to use and very accessible in terms of like the language. And now she'll have to fill in her basic information and then add any authorized representatives that she might have. Of course, this is optional because she's applying on behalf of herself. And then in the final step, she can review and submit. You might notice that we made sure that the review page is actually in the review page. In the existing system, we found that users were feeling frustrated about having to take or go to another page to access the review page. Why can't the review page be on the review page? And so this allows Aurelia to easily look at her information and go back to edit it. So again, there we have it. Even though we couldn't remove account creation from this process or having to log in, we were able to really streamline the steps, going from 9 steps to 4 steps.
And as you may have noticed in the demonstration, there was a clear differentiation between the 2 different types of participation that users can access. They can simply share their comments, that has a lower degree of commitment, or they can register as an intervener and be part of the full hearing process. We wanted to include inclusive and accessible language that is easily understandable for the general public. And then also we were able to completely remove the login for commenters. And while interveners, they still needed the login, through our research, we found that those who participated very often were often interveners, and they actually preferred having an account to easily fill in their information when they're participating. As a result of the improved designs, we also got feedback from our users. When we tested it with 10 different participants, they rated it around 8.2 out of 10 for the updated designs. So what else did people say about this new update? Well, one participant mentioned that this form makes it easy enough for any Indigenous nations to use. That's important for those who want to fill it out independently without the support of consultants. Another person also mentioned that this experience was great. It simplifies the process, is a lot shorter to navigate than the previous tool.
Spelled things out for you in a way that gives, I think, a greater level of like accessibility and just ease of use, and really felt like an intuitive process.
And now I will pass it back to Sean.
Thanks, Jillian. And despite all this excellent feedback, not everything went the way we planned. So we wanted to share with you our top 5 lessons learned and hope that you can learn from some of our mistakes and to help make it easier to find and eliminate barriers within your own organizations. So key takeaway number 1, eliminating data fields may have ripple effects. It's okay to cut features that no longer serve your organization and your users, but eliminating data fields may have ripple effects. And when we tried to remove the postal code during this work, it made sense. It was easier to submit comments, less burden for those participants. But when we consider this against the potential implications this may have on being able to actually analyze this data in a spatial way in the future, we realize that this may actually affect our ability to harness advanced analytics. And we decided that the impact of this decision was broader than the project was scoped. In the end, we decided we're going to keep the postal code, but we do recommend that you consider, what did your users say? And what is the data that backs up removing or adding a feature? How are they using that data today? How might they use that data in the future if it was available in a different format? And how will it be stored? And if you're going to keep it, do you actually plan to use it? All of these things need to be taken into consideration. Consider downstream implications beyond the project. Now, removing barriers to participation is a big job. It's much bigger than one project, one process, and in our case, multiple different systems. The decisions we made on this project had real implications to downstream users, systems, processes, and other enterprise initiatives. Through this project, we learned the importance of understanding these critical dependencies and working to mitigate them to ensure alignment between complementary initiatives. So that in the future, when we do build our new CER portal, we will be giving consideration to how that data may be received, where it will be stored, how it will be located, and ultimately how it may be consumed in the future by users or applications. Our third takeaway is really that we need to listen, engage, and leverage the experts, because regulatory change is hard. It's hard work. We were blind to the process early on, the process that our experts lived and breathed every day. So we had to temper the art of the possible versus the reality of how things are actually done on the ground. But we worked with our core team of adjudication experts, and they were the ones that made this change possible, and we couldn't have done it without them. Now, a big learning for us, which unfortunately we learned a little bit later down in the project than we would have liked to, but this is a big one, which is plan to build a solution, not a prototype. At the beginning, we knew the challenge of removing barriers to participation was big. So we planned to build an MVP so that we could still deliver something viable by the end of the fellowship. And we did. But that viable prototype now needs to be built into a product. It now requires additional time, resources to complete the development and the integration with existing systems. If we knew this up front, we would have planned the project differently, involved development and IT earlier, and this would have reduced a lot of the internal barriers that we inadvertently created through this game-changing work. So don't just play it safe. Think beyond the sandbox to what your idea may look like in production, and then plan accordingly. And lastly, don't forget the process or the humans behind the forums. It took time for the team to realize we were stuck on the wrong solution. From our design research, we knew we had a problem. We weren't sure if we were able to remove the login altogether. Another team was working on another project that was similar to this one, so we didn't push on this item as hard as we should have. This type of regulatory change required buy-in from all levels across the organization, including our key decision makers. But once we had fully engaged the experts, the possibilities began to emerge. And this is what led to a dramatic shift in the project and ultimately to where we are going in 2022. Now let me invite Jillian back on stage.
Thanks, Sean. So, as Sean mentioned, we invite you to come check out the Canada Energy Regulator's new improved participation portal that's coming in 2022. We also want to give a big thanks to everyone involved in this project, from staff across Canada Energy Regulator, the executives, directors, commissioners, core team, and more. We also want to thank COFOR Canada, the staff, and the fellows. And for those who I haven't mentioned, thank you to everyone who made this work possible.
And when you stop by, think about maybe leaving a comment. You won't need a login or a password. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. Jillian and Sean are going to be moving over to our Q&A platform. So if you have any questions about their work, you can join them there. And you can do that by clicking on the link in the agenda to join on the Wonder platform. At 3:30, we have a bit of a brain break scheduled. So in order to join that, just head over to channel 1. And we'll be back here with the last case study at 4 p.m.